Good evening and welcome back to day 600 of The Longing, where today we will be continuing to read The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. So, let's get going. Toad found himself flying through the air with the strong upward rush and delicate curve of a swallow. He liked the motion, and was just beginning to wonder whether it would go on until he developed wings and turned into a toad bird, when he landed on his back with a thump, in the soft, rich grass of a meadow. Sitting up, he could just see the motor car in the pond, nearly submerged. The gentleman and the driver, encumbered by their long coats, were floundering helplessly in the water. He picked himself up rapidly, and set off running across country as hard as he could, scrambling through hedges, jumping ditches, pounding across fields till he was breathless and weary, and had to settle down into an easy walk. When he had recovered his breath somewhat, and was able to think calmly, he began to giggle, and from giggling he took to laughing, and he laughed till he had to sit down under a hedge. "Ho ho!" he cried, in ecstasies of self-admiration. "Toad again! Toad as usual comes out on top. Who was it got them to give him a lift? Who managed to get on the front seat of for the sake of fresh air? Who persuaded them into letting him see if he could drive? Who landed them all in a horse pond? Who escaped flying gaily and unscathed through the air, leaving the narrow-minded, grudging, timid excursionists in the mud where they should rightly be? Why, Toad, of course. Clever Toad, great Toad, good Toad." Then he burst into song again, and chanted with uplifted voice. The motor car went poop, poop, poop as it raced along the road. Who was it steered it into a pond? Ingenious Mr. Toad. "Oh, how very clever I am! How clever, how clever, how very clev." A slight noise at a distance behind him made him turn his head and look. Oh horror, oh misery, oh despair. About 2 fields off, a chauffeur in his leather gaiters and 2 large rural policemen were visible, running towards him as hard as they could go. Poor Toad sprang to his feet and pelted away again, his heart in his mouth. "Oh my," he gasped as he panted along. "What an ass I am! What a conceited and heedless ass! Swaggering again, shouting and singing songs again, sitting still and gassing again. Oh my, oh my, oh my!" He glanced back and saw to his dismay that they were gaining on him. On he ran desperately, but kept looking back, and saw that they still gained steadily. He did his best, but he was a fat animal, and his legs were short, and still they gained. He could hear them close behind him now. Ceasing to heed where he was going, he struggled on blindly and wildly, looking back over his shoulder at the now triumphant enemy, when suddenly the earth failed under his feet. He grasped at the air, and splash! He found himself head over ears in deep water, rapid water, water that bore him along with a force he could not contend with, and he knew that in his blind panic he had run straight into the river. He rose to the surface and tried to grasp the reeds and the rushes that grew along the water's edge, close under the bank. Excuse me. But the stream was so strong that it tore them out of his hands. "Oh my," gasped poor Toad, "if ever I steal a motor car again, if ever I sing another conceited song." Then down he went, and up and came up breathless and spluttering. Presently he saw that he was approaching a big dark hole in the bank, just above his head, and as the stream bore him past, he reached up with a paw, and caught hold of the edge and held on. Then slowly and with difficulty he drew himself up out of the water, till at last he was able to rest his elbows on the edge of the hole. There he remained for some minutes, puffing and panting, for he was quite exhausted. As he sighed and blew and stared before him into the dark hole, some bright small thing shone and twinkled in its depths, moving towards him. As it approached, a face grew up gradually around it, and it was a familiar face, brown and small, with whiskers, grave and round, with neat ears and silky hair. It was the water rat. Chapter 11. Like summer tempests came his tears. The rat put out a neat little brown paw, gripped Toad firmly by the scruff of the neck, and gave a hoist and a pull, and the waterlogged Toad came up slowly but surely over the edge of the hole, till at last he stood safe and sound in the hall, streaked with mud and weed to be sure, and with the water streaming off him, but happy and high-spirited as of old, now that he found himself once more in the house of a friend, and dodgings and evasions were over, and he could lay aside a disguise that was unworthy of his position, and wanted such a lot of living up to. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I've been through such times since I saw you last, you can't think. Such trials and sufferings, and all so nobly borne, then such escapes, such disguises, such subterfuges, and all so cleverly planned and carried out. Been in prison, got out of it, of course, been thrown into a canal, swam ashore, stole a horse, sold him for a large sum of money, humbugged everybody, made 'em all do exactly what I wanted. Oh, I am a smart Toad, and no mistake. What do you think my last exploit was? Just hold on till I tell you." "Toad," said the Water Rat gravely and firmly, "you go off upstairs at once, and take off that old cotton rag that looks as if it might formerly have belonged to some washerwoman, and clean yourself thoroughly, and put on some of my clothes, and try and come down looking like a gentleman if you can. For a more shabby, bedraggled, disreputable-looking object than you are, I never set eyes on in my whole life. Now stop swaggering and arguing, and be off. I'll have something to say to you later." Toad was at first inclined to stop and do some talking back at him. He had had enough of being ordered about when he was in prison, and here was the thing being begun all over again, apparently. And by a rat, too. However, he caught sight of himself in the looking-glass over the hat-stand, with the rusty black bonnet perched rakishly over one eye. And he changed his mind and went very quickly and humbly upstairs to the rat's dressing-room. There he had a thorough wash and brush-up, changed his clothes, and stood for a long time before the glass, contemplating himself with pride and pleasure, and thinking what utter idiots all the people must have been to have ever mistaken him for one moment for a washerwoman. By the time he came down again, luncheon was on the table, and very glad Toad was to see it, for he had been through some trying experiences, and had taken much hard exercise since the excellent breakfast provided for him by the gypsy. While they ate, Toad told the rat all his adventures, dwelling chiefly on his own cleverness, and presence of mind in emergencies, and cunning in tight places, and rather making out that he had been having a gay and highly coloured experience. But the more he talked and boasted, the more grave and silent the rat became. When at last Toad had talked himself to a standstill, there was silence for a while, and then the rat said, "Now, Toady, I don't want to give you pain, after all you've been through already, but, seriously, don't you see what an awful ass you've been making of yourself? On your own admission you've been handcuffed, imprisoned, starved, chased, terrified out of your life, insulted, jeered at, and ignominiously flung into the water, by a woman too. Where's the amusement in that? Where does the fun come in? And all because you must needs go and steal a motor car? You know that you've never had anything but trouble from motor cars from the moment you first set eyes on one. But if you will be mixed up with them, as you generally are 5 minutes after you've started, why steal them? Be a cripple if you think it's exciting. Be a bankrupt for a change, if you've set your mind on it, but why choose to be a convict? When are you going to be sensible, and think of your friends, and try and be a credit to them? Do you suppose it's any pleasure for me, for instance, to hear animals saying, as I go about, that I'm the chap that keeps company with jailbirds?" And with that, we come to the end of the episode. Well, there we go. So, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night. no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow. Back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.